Hello guys, let's start out by painting our diffuse color channel here. Before painting, please be sure that you are working on the correct geometry. You can check right here on top. And let's turn it on and off to see if it's the correct one. Okay, and another thing is be sure to check your resolutions. Okay. So let's get started. I like to start my map by creating an image occlusion layer, and for this to work you have to first to pre-process the ambient occlusion on the object. So keep an eye right here, and when I apply it will pre-calculate the ambient occlusion, and it should take some seconds. And okay, it's done. Now let's add a new geometry and image occlusion layer, and I like to give it a bit of tweak to make it not so strong. And I like to work like this because it already gives you a nice volumes, and I think the shaded view is sometimes a bit distracting because it gives this super black areas, super dark areas. And of course you can always go and change the scene lights, but I think this is an extra step that you don't need to care about, but it's up to you guys. Okay, so let's create our first layer. It's our color base layer. And let's fire up some images here. At this time you already had been choosing your image, so you should know what skin color you want to use, and use the C shortcut to access the eyedropper right here, and just to get a average color of your skin. And you can fill the foreground to give it a nice base color. And let's create another layer so that we can paint more details on top of that and we don't lose our base color. And what I usually do is to take a skin picture that I think it's a good resolution, and it has good details, and Shift plus you can turn up the opacity, and Shift minus you can turn it down. First thing I do in this base layer is to choose a nice spot on my texture and paint it over, and so that we can have some more information and adding details later on onto another layers. Uh, let's start with the forehead. Lock the image, and I like to use this soft slow brush because it gives you some nice edges, and you can slowly build up to your texture without having harsh edges and stuff. And just keep moving your texture until you get to the right spot, and baking out constantly so your buffer doesn't get too big. And another thing you can do is to crop images. You can do it on Photoshop or here directly on Mary, and just paint on the center of the image, on the on. Be sure to have your camera pointing straight to the object so it doesn't get uh, too stretched. You can always go back and fix, but it's always a good idea to try and correct stretchiness from the beginning. And you can see me trying to give it an overall skin feel. There's nothing too that calls for your attention right now. There is not too contrasty spots, or I'm not painting hairs or eye bags or nothing that can get too distracting. It's just a base color for you to have something to build on top. And also rotate your texture from time to time so that it doesn't get too repetitive. sometimes you find some really difficult spots like behind the ears, and if you can't reach those areas, and you can always try to do, but if you can't reach those areas, a good idea is to go to the orthogonal view and paint on top of the UV. It's much less painful. And I turn off my image occlusion layer and fix some of the spots like around the lips and on the nostrils. And one thing to pay attention to is when painting onto your ortho UV view, sometimes depending on your geometry, like this in the years, you probably may get some stretching, as you can see here, and it's up to you to, or you can fix this on the 3D view and go back and forth between the two, but sometimes it doesn't even show on your renders, so you can choose to fix it or not. And I think we have already a nice base texture to build details on top, and it's nice and even, and you can see that you have a overall feel to it. So the next step would be to give some more color information. So I'll create another layer and start painting tone variations on top of that. What I like to do here is to put a little bit of maybe the lighting information from the ears, and it's something you should have on your shaders later on, but I like to straighten a bit the effect by putting onto my diffuse texture as well. So you can see me giving some red tones that should be from the subsurface scattering effect. And making some shadows. And painting those fake light shadow areas, at least for me, it enhances a lot my final render. So that's how I keep doing my color maps. And some issues here and there. And there's a small trick that I like to use to overcome these small issues. That is, by pressing X, you can switch the colors, and you can get a darker color and a lighter color, and alternate painting between the two, so that it smooth out this area. And it's easy and fast way, and it's actually a lot faster on the shortcuts. And I always try not to paint on uh, perpendicular faces to you, or your geometry might get these small issues. And of course, remember, you can always go to the ortho UV view and, and fix there too. And you can see the ambient occlusion affecting the some of the shadowed areas. Slowly building to a more colored look. So the ambient occlusion gives you a hint on where your shadows should be, so use it to your favor, and don't just wash out your texture with colors, and try and maintain the light and shadow relationship. Now let's paint the mouthy area. So with the texture on the view, we can hit C and get with the eyedropper a base color and start painting on the lips. Again with the slow flow brush. Turn off the occlusion layer so you can see it better. In another area I like to paint is inside the ears. And this region right here. And let's take an image, choose as reference. Let's grab some colors from it. And this one is I like to fake some of the lights and shadows and subsurface scattering effects right on my diffuse color map, because although it always people always usually do it on the shader, for me it works best. It enhances a bit my renders, so I just go on and put this information right on the color texture. And here you can see the effect on the ears. And again, remember this is it's up to you guys to put some light and shadows and other effects like skin subsurface scattering onto your textures. I like to do it because it gives more power or effect to my final renders. So I like to do in some areas. Feel free to experiment where you can put this onto your images. And inside the eyes, I also like to fill with some color. And this spot on the ear is usually is a little bit darker because uh, it catches a lot more sun than the rest of the ear. So let's put a bit of color here too. That's it for the tonal variations, and all the colors are already in place. In the next step, we'll see how to add the textures on top of that, and we'll be cloning the textures itself and not colors anymore, and on the face and eyes and all around. And moving on to texture projecting on our mesh, let's create another layer, and call it texture photo, maybe. I'll load some of the images, and I'll try and match as close as possible. And it's always a good idea, as you can see, to have multiple references. And if you are if you're taking pictures of someone, and try and use a diffuse light, and try and get as many angles as you can, because they sure will be used throughout your texture painting. And sometimes you see that your photo reference doesn't match up exactly with your 3D model, so do it in small spots. In this case, I'm trying and match the eyes only, and you can see maybe the lips are not right, but that's okay because we are trying to focus on the part we are painting right now. And by pressing the Alt key, you can see what's below. Once we are confident with the spot, and slowly start building up the projection. Pressing out to hide the projection image. And again, try to paint on flat areas. Of course, you can go and fix them later, but it's best if you can paint on the flat textures. If you paint on the sides of the face, for example, everything will stretch out, and it will be more difficult for you to fix it on later. Let's reach the eraser, and I think we can erase some of the hair on top of the head, make a smoother transition to the forehead, like this. Another very useful tool is the spline warper. And with the spline warper, you can select an area around your image, and it works like a lattice. Uh, with the up and down arrow keys on your keyboard, you can add or subtract divisions, and this way you can change the image buffer to accommodate your your texture on top of your character. And it's great to for you to deform the image and fit to your character. Once you are satisfied with the results, you can apply and bake the buffer image to your mesh, to your texture layer. Let's get a look closer to the forehead. Smooth it out a bit, trying to get rid of the seams. So let's create a layer mask and click on it, and then we can press D to go the default values on the color pickers, and let's paint black on the areas where we don't want to have the layer of the layer effect. Let's try and make it as smooth and as fluid as possible. And you can shift click on your mask to turn it on and off so you can see the effect. We can see some issues on the nose. We can fix it later. Trying to smooth a little bit more. Now it's time to fix the nose, the nostril areas. Again, good to have many angles. So here's a good photo. Let's try and match it closely. Actually, sometimes you can put the image a little bit bigger than your actual geometry, so it doesn't have borders. Okay, so slowly building up, slowly fixing. and using a brush with a very smooth uh, edge is always a good idea because it blends better. Here I'm trying to fix the inner part of the eyes and the lacrimal hole, like this. And the Ctrl plus shift and click and drag to rescale your buffer image, your projection image. Going back to this spot on the nose, and you can see there's a lot of going back and forth between some really difficult spots. This is a side effect of projection of images onto the curvature of your mesh, so it's a problem you might get used to solve. And after we have the color landmarks placed onto our ears, we'll grab some of the texture information from the photograph and project onto it a bit. And remember to try and match as close as possible. You always will have the spline warper tool. And also be sure to not have too many repetitions. So always try and paint different areas so they do not seem like a cloning stamp. Try and give it a natural feel, a chaotic series of colors and textures, so it don't get boring. And I like to do the color layer before putting on projecting on the textures because it blends better later on the process. It gives nicer results. Another thing we can do is to change to a noisy brush, something like this one, and get the color from any brown spot that looks like the skin you are using as reference. Let's say this brown spot right here, and you can throw in some freckles. Also helps to sell better the skin. As you can see, very subtle, but it's there and makes it feel much more real. And you can try and vary the scale of your brush. you should have uh, different sizes. Also helps make it more natural. And now with the razor, you can blend a bit better. Subtle effect, but it's good to have. Same thing on the right ear. Again, adding some spots, some freckles, some trying to break up the homogeneous color. And let's add a little bit of texture on the cheeks. Trying to get good proportions. You don't want your image to be too off scale, because the human brain tends to realize that something is wrong, because faces we see every day, so our brain knows how to check if what's wrong with faces. So be sure to have the proper scale when you're painting, because you have, if you have a spot that's larger than it should be, uh, it might get noticed. Let's do the left cheek now. The reddish spots help to sell the blood going through, going inside your body, so it's good to have. Let's paint a little bit the chin area. Try not to paint too much on the borders, because it will stretch. Let's clean up this dark area, trying to erase and smooth blend into the skin. Here's our projection texture. Let's try and fix some minor issues in the ortho UV view. let's give a solid color to the inside of the eyes. have a few more uh, issues, small issues you can fix. Really easy to overcome these small spots. Be sure to do a final check on your texture and look for all these small issues. They might come up with some textures you put on, and they might show up in different areas of your texture. Be sure to do a final checkup before exporting your files. And I think that's it. Here you have the final diffuse texture. On the next videos, we'll learn how to create additional maps like bump maps, backlight map, and subsurface maps. See you later.